This is the Animal Agenda, and I'm Tom Kiesche. Our guest this week is Margaret Callahan, the Chief Mission Officer for a 501c3 nonprofit called Pet Partners. And today, we'll be chatting about their therapy animal program. Full disclosure, the reason I reached out to Pet Partners was that over the past few years, while volunteering at shelters or advocating for animals online, several people have reached out and asked me if I knew anything about how they could get into animal therapy programs, or which animals at the shelters would be good for therapy, ESA, or service animals. And honestly, I didn't know the difference between the terms. Finally, after saying I don't know one too many times, I decided to learn more. I reached out to a friend of mine, Chaplain Peggy at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, who I believe had connections to the therapy animal program over there. And that's how I initially heard of Pet Partners and started my online research. Some history I discovered online. The company's story began in the mid-1970s as a brainchild of a group of psychiatrists, veterinarians, pioneers, and visionaries. The Delta Foundation was formed in 1977 in Portland, Oregon. In 1981, the organization's name changed to the Delta Society. In 2012, the Delta Society formally changed its name to Pet Partners in order to convey its missions clearly. And who better to learn about animal therapy or therapy animals and get their mission conveyed than their Chief Mission Officer, Margaret Callahan. Hello, Margaret.
Hi there, Tom.
Thanks for being on. And a couple more things I discovered online about you and the company in prep for this conversation. Your background spans education and healthcare. You're the daughter of a veterinarian. You've been with Pet Partners since 2013. You and your family live on a small farm near Seattle with dogs, cats, guinea pigs, chickens, goats, and miniature donkeys. Currently, there are approximately 15,000 active therapy teams in play. Pet Partners operates out of Bellevue, Washington, but is a national organization operating in all 50 states as well as Canada. Also, I discovered my new favorite saying, yayaba, which I hope we get into later. And I realized another new key phrase that I'll be sharing at the future at shelters during mentoring and adoption counseling, and that is, there are two ends to every leash. It's a partnership. It's a team. So with all that said, is there anything that needs to be cleared up or go into more detail before we move forward?
No, Tom, you've got a great overview, and I was thrilled to hear you mention YAYABA because that is one of my favorite acronyms at Pet Partners as well.
I love it. I really do. So there's lots of more information about Pet Partners on petpartners.org and the company's YouTube channel, which I did look through, and that's how I started my research. So, number one, since you are the Chief Mission Officer, what is the mission?
Our mission is to improve human health and well-being through the human-animal bond. And the human-animal bond is that mutually beneficial relationship between animals and people that can enhance our physical, social, emotional, psychological well-being. And so one of the things that Pet Partners believes really deeply in and sort of infuses our philosophy on all things animal is that concept that it has to be mutually beneficial. The animals who participate in the therapy animal program should be getting as much out of it as the people who are receiving their visits.
Excellent. So I know you do this a lot since you're the Chief Mission Officer and you've been doing this for 11 years. But I'm going to ask you another question, and I don't know if you've ever heard this. What is not the mission?
What is not the mission? That's a great question. And I think what is not the mission is actually a really common terminology confusion that people have. A lot of people conflate service animals and therapy animals. And you can see why, right? Both of those are animals that are enhancing people's lives. The way I like to think about it is that a service animal or even an emotional support animal, an ESA, those are a one-to-one relationship. You have one animal who is benefiting one person, whether it's through allowing them to do the activities of daily living or supporting their mental health. There's that one-to-one relationship. A therapy animal is a one-to-many relationship. You have one therapy animal and their handler going out into the community, and they may be visiting the children's hospital or a senior center or helping kids read at the library. That one therapy animal is impacting the lives of lots of different people.
You've done this before. That's a great answer. So we'll get into that a little bit more again later because I think that that's really important. And that's what I've learned. And when people come to me saying, hey, which dog here would be a good therapy animal or service animal, I don't think that they understand either what they're asking. And also, I would love to talk a little bit about why people actually, let me ask you that. Why do you think people come to you or come to the company and want a therapy animal? What misconception is there?
So when you say want a therapy animal, do you mean like are
So
looking for their right therapy animal?
I think
Or
sometimes they come thinking that they want it. They actually want an ESA, but they're calling it a therapy animal, or they want they're calling it a service animal, but they want to do therapy work. So
yeah,
you find that a lot?
I feel like it's well-intentioned people who it's hard to find good source information, especially if you're searching on the internet and you're not really carefully sourcing where you're getting your information from. It's easy to conflate those terms because all three of those types of animals absolutely benefit people, right?
Yes.
And especially for, I would say, emotional support animals and therapy animals, they are both in many ways really trying to support and enhance people's sort of emotional, psychological lives. A lot of times, obviously, with therapy animals, there's lots of physical benefits as well, right? But you can see how those can be easily conflated. For people who are really interested in therapy animal work, really the thing that they need to think about, it's you're sharing this beloved pet, this animal that you have this deep, trusting relationship with. You're sharing them with the public. And that's really for people who are like, ooh, that sounds neat, or read stories about therapy animals. Really, the piece that you have to have in order to be a successful therapy animal team is you have to be able to want to go out in public and interact with others that you don't necessarily know and share that animal. And so it's not right for everyone, and it's not right for every animal. And that's okay, because just being pet parents or pet guardians, that has a lot of value too.
So I agree with everything you just said. And I think one of the reasons I didn't do research and learn about it initially was I didn't know where to start. And it wasn't until I went to the Pet Partners website that's really clearly laid out that it was all there for me to read and to figure out and to see the difference between the kinds of animals that are in service. So the one question that I didn't get answered was, can a dog or animal be an ESA and a therapy animal?
Yeah, we do have some handlers who have an animal as their emotional support animal that they also volunteer with. Sometimes it's even part of that plan that they may have with their mental health professional around interacting in public and feeling safe and having this emotional support animal that also is a therapy animal. So certainly that can happen. It's not terribly common, but it's not uncommon either. It's doable.
But yet a service animal is probably not going to be a therapy animal because it's in service to that individual at all times, correct?
It would depend on what kind of service animal it was, but a lot of times you're right. A service animal is focusing on the needs of its individual, right? And so by nature, you're asking it to divide its attention, that animal's attention, between interacting with the public and paying attention to their human. So depending upon what the needs were, that might be beneficial, or it might be a distraction for that service animal.
I think we got it for everyone listening. This is the Animal Agenda. I'm Tom Kiesche. Our guest is Mary Margaret Callahan, the Chief Mission Officer for Pet Partners. We're discussing therapy animals. What was your biggest relevant or non-relevant thing that you learned from your veterinarian parent?
My father was a veterinarian for years and years, and we had an assorted number of animals come through our household, as you might imagine, right? Animals who needed new homes, or we had the three-legged dog and the blind cat and all those animals. And I think that one of the things that I learned growing up in a household with exposure to lots of different kinds of animals is that animals don't need to be perfect. I think one of the things we love about animals is that their ability to give us unconditional love, right? And so I had the three-legged dog and the blind cat and the rats that came home from school at the end of the year and things like that. And I think that it's important for us to also remember that animals and therapy animals, they don't need to be perfect, right? Some people think that to be a therapy animal, they need to be this purebred animal. They have to have, you know, the levels of qualifications that you would see and make obedience trials and things like that. And that's simply not true, right? People can resonate and connect with a wide variety of animals, dogs, cats, and other species. Pet Partners registers 9 different types of animals. And I think imperfection is part of the perfection. I think that that's what people gravitate and love. One of the species that we register that people find surprising are domesticated rats. And some people go, oh, God, rats, that does not sound therapeutic to me. And it may not be therapeutic to everyone. But do you know who I have heard loves rats? Kids in juvenile justice. Anyone who feels like someone has drawn conclusions about them without actually getting to know them, they kind of like meeting these rats that are smart, intelligent, have tons of personality, can be taught tricks. It's different than how people have maybe interacted with rats in the past. And to them, that's very rewarding.
I love that. I love that. Let's get into that. I was going to get into that later, but what are the 9 species? And I know all animals have to be on a leash or in a basket. So if you can get into the 9 species and which are basket animals.
Sure. So dogs are obviously the most common species we register. About 93, 94% of all animals that come registered with Pet Partners are canines. The next most popular species that we register happens to be equines, specifically miniature horses. And I myself am a miniature donkey parent. I have some mini donkeys at my farm. Miniature horses are wonderful, right? Horses, many people know, very sort of affiliative with people. And small miniatures can go into a lot of places that a very large breed dog could, right? Whether it's retirement homes or hospitals or things like that. So after that, cats. While not every cat is necessarily going to want to be a therapy cat, certainly there are many successful therapy cats out there in the world. So we've got 3. Now we drop down to sort of the less common ones, right? Rabbits and guinea pigs, kind of the next level of commonality, right? That's a good example of animals that are usually more comfortable being carried in a basket or something like that, right? They're small prey animals. They need to feel safe and protected. And for getting them around and about, having them in something as you're moving room to room or having them introduced to people, oftentimes that's really helpful. After that, we get into some of our less common species. We do have llamas or alpacas that are registered, not a ton, but they're amazing. I want you to imagine, if you're recovering in the hospital, how delighted, surprised, and distracted from your pain and recovery you might be if you saw a llama coming down the hallway. We also have pot-bellied pigs registered. Parrots. Parrots are amazing. Being a parrot owner is a huge commitment. These are long-lived animals with specialized needs, but those who do this, phenomenal. Some of my very favorite pictures and videos I've seen are of parrots participating in reading programs with kids. Birds are very visually acute because they are also a prey species, and birds will, as you turn the pages of books, look at the pictures. And kids find that fascinating when they're reading to their parrots to practice their reading. So I think that gets us up to 9, and then you've already heard me mention rats. So I think that's everybody.
Okay, so I hear all these animals, and I hear hospitals, prisons, juvenile halls, schools, libraries. I don't think you mentioned, but I've read about. How do you keep an animal from pooping or peeing, and what is the requirements of those animals in that regard?
So certainly a bigger challenge for some of those less common species than it is for dogs who are used to being house trained, and cats who have sort of a natural affinity to using litter boxes and things like that. But you're right. being house trained is a requirement if you're going out in public. It is possible to house train llamas, miniature horses, pigs. And so that is sometimes work that if you're interested in becoming a volunteer with one of those less common species, you do have some work and some coordination to do to figure that out. A lot of times it has to do with deciding sort of the time you're going to visit. Are you going to feed them? Most people don't want to feed their animal right before they go on a visit. They're going to wait until afterwards and then feed. So it's all really about getting to know your animal and anticipating. And that's really what being a great handler comes down to, how well you know your animal.
Yayaba.
Yayaba, you are your animal's best advocate. That is our saying at Pet Partners.
I love it. And I've said that many, many times over the last year or years as an advocate and shelter volunteer, but I've never known that Yayaba. And I love that because I tell people all the time, it's our responsibility to protect our animals. And we get so many animals at shelters because people don't protect their animals. So I love that. So these interviews just fly by, and there's so much information that we're not going to get to. So again, petpartners.org has so much information, and they have links to their Instagram and their YouTube channel, and there's so much information there. But I was going over the Instagram, and I noticed a few different fundraisers that you've done in the past: Pet of the Year, Treats and Sweets Days. So first off, why is fundraising important to Pet Partners? And secondly, what is a future next event that's coming up for Pet Partners?
Well, like any nonprofit organization, right? Fundraising is one of the ways that sort of we keep our doors open, and we try and make sure that as many people as want therapy animal visits can have therapy animal visits. And frankly, the interest is greater than the amount of qualified volunteers there are out there roaming around in the world. So our volunteers do, as most pet parents do, invest a lot in preparing, right, and becoming volunteers. The fee that they pay Pet Partners covers a fraction of the actual cost it takes for us to do things like provide insurance for all of our volunteers wherever they're volunteering. In today's day and age, in a litigious society, you really do need multi-million-dollar insurance policies in order to go to your local hospital or your local senior center. And we're proud to provide that for our volunteers. One of our next activities that anyone can participate in as a fundraiser is actually the world's largest pet walk. This is such a fun event. You can do this independently. You can go out for a hike with your dog by yourself and log that as your walking steps for your world's largest pet walk. You can walk with friends. You can find a group of people who are participating, but it's an opportunity to do what we know animals do well for us: enhance our health by getting out and moving and walking. So whether you've got a dog and you're going to go walk around the lake, or you are going to put your cat in a stroller and the two of you are going to go for a stroll, you're all welcome. You don't have to be a volunteer to participate. And it's really a fun event. That happens in September.
So that's the next big one coming up in September.
Absolutely.
So anybody listening to this program can find out more about your company, obviously through your website that we mentioned, but your Instagram will have those fundraisers and have advance notice of those fundraisers, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
You're listening to The Animal Agenda on KPFK. I'm Tom Kiesche, and I'm speaking with Mary Margaret Callahan, the Chief Mission Officer for Pet Partners. We're chatting about her company and the volunteers and the pets that help make it work. So I want to go back a second and just hit something a little harder. One of the reasons why, and Pet Partners is not the only company out there, but one of the reasons why a therapy team, and it is a team because there's two ends of the leash, needs or should have a company like Pet Partners on board is the insurance. Because someplace like Cedars-Sinai isn't going to let just anybody come in and walk the halls. And Pet Partners has a reputation that precedes it, and you have minimum qualifications and requirements. And there's a standard of behavior, not only in the pets, but in the handlers. Do you want to talk about some of the requirements that a pet needs to have? We hit already has to be potty trained or housebroken, but what are some of the other requirements?
So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I wonder if my animal could be a therapy animal, the first question you should ask yourself is, how affiliative is your animal? How much does that animal want to meet and interact with people it doesn't know? I had a Chihuahua, one of my first pets as an adult. Boy, she loved me. She would have done anything I asked. We were very closely bonded. Even after I got married, she'd look at my husband and think, why is he here? And so, she was a great example of a dog that was affiliative towards me, but not really so much with other people. She would have hated being a therapy animal. So the first question to ask yourself, is my animal highly affiliative? Do they want to meet strangers? Do they have core obedience skills? We're not talking about fancy stuff, right? But think about it when you're out in public. If you need to call your animal back to you, have them sit or stay or be down to make themselves physically smaller because you're riding in an elevator with 5 other people or whatever that may look like, right? And then how comfortable are they with noises, distractions? Can they come back and bring their attention back to you? And a lot of that is based on that trusting relationship you and your animal have. These are all skills that are tested for at the Pet Partners evaluation. So you do basically kind of like a role play of what a visit might be like. And we're looking for the skills that your animal has, but also that you have. Can you observe your animal and recognize their body language? And if they get a little startled or they need some extra support, can you recognize that and give your animal what they need? Those are some of the skills you need as a handler.
Yayaba.
Yayaba, that's exactly it.
And 2 ends of every leash. It's both the handler and the pet have to be willing and able to do the job required. And not every animal is right for every situation. Some animals, I was listening to one of your volunteers talk about how one of their animals just wasn't good with kids because they were a herding dog, and the kids' chaos just didn't work well with the animal's instincts. So the animal was better with seniors. So again, as someone that does animal adoption counseling at the shelters, I always tell people it's not just what animal you want to work with or you want, it's what animal you're right for. And the same goes through with Pet Partners and therapy dogs. It's not just that you want to work with children at libraries, but is your animal right for that? And is it good for them?
Absolutely. That couldn't have been better said, Tom. It's really this dance. It's this balance. And I've had volunteers before who had their just heart set on being in a certain environment, and they do an initial visit and they go, "Ugh, I could tell my dog she didn't like that. She didn't enjoy it." And that's Yaya by its core, because they're being their animal's best advocate. So they're going to choose a different environment, even though in their heart they thought that was what they wanted. They know for their animal's best interests, they need to pick something else.
Yeah. So I want to get back to the ESA, service animal therapy animal thing, because when someone asks me what I know about therapy animals or how can they get a therapy animal, or which dog at the shelter would be good for therapy animals, I often think they're asking me that because they want to go into supermarkets or airplanes or shopping malls with that animal. And that's the primary reason they're asking me. I honestly feel that. So with therapy animals, can they go on planes? Can they go into supermarkets? And that should not be the reason why somebody wants to have a therapy animal. So can you go into that a little bit?
Of course. So that shouldn't be the reason that you're considering pursuing becoming a therapy animal team. But it is important to know therapy animals are only welcome in establishments in which they've been invited. So just being a therapy animal doesn't automatically give you a right of access anywhere in public. Now, it's true that sometimes therapy animals may be invited into environments because that facility deems that a therapy animal has probably had or should have had, if it's with a reputable organization, an assessment to establish that it's safe interacting in public. But still, it's only by invitation. So if you choose to fly with your animal. In that situation, your therapy animal is still just a pet. Whatever pet travel restrictions that airline may have, those apply to you, even if you have a therapy animal status.
Excellent. Excellent. So we're getting towards the ends. And since I have a love for shelter animals and a new love for therapy animals, do you have a brief story about how an animal went from a shelter to a therapy animal? I don't even know the answer to this, but
We do have many therapy animals who started out from a shelter or other environment like that. So it's not uncommon at all. And I would absolutely encourage people who have found their pets through shelters to ask themselves if being a therapy animal could be right for them, because it may be. But I can think of one story, beautiful husky that I've met on multiple occasions who lives in Texas. Very sadly, this husky came from very difficult situations and was seriously abused and neglected. Was adopted by a wonderful family who had other huskies, worked with him to rehabilitate him. This husky ended up doing a lot of work as a therapy animal in a bereavement center. Worked a lot with pediatric children, things like that. And one of the most moving short stories that I heard is that as this husky was being introduced to a little boy, and they sort of gave some history about Bellen's background, the little boy says, "That's okay. I know what that's like to be ignored too." And you'll never know necessarily how people may connect with an animal or something about that animal. But that was a beautiful story of sort of this almost rags to riches situation with this animal who had been abused and neglected, who was then so well cared for and rehabilitated and became a therapy animal, and then demonstrated that that journey was possible for children who had also been abused and neglected, who got to meet this dog and go, but look how happy and fulfilling this dog is, giving back to other people. Maybe I could do that too.
okay. I don't know how to end this better than that. That was beautiful. So I want to thank you for being here today. We could have talked forever. If people want to know more, petpartners.org. They can learn more about you on there. They can learn more about staff. They can learn more about the program. Thank you so much, Mary Margaret Callahan. Thank you for being here and chatting about therapy animals. I appreciate you being here.
It's been my pleasure, Tom. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to The Animal Agenda. Our guest this week has been Mary Margaret Callahan from Pet Partners. For more information about Pet Partners, go to their website, petpartners.org. Many special thanks to Melody King and producer Marlena Bond. Please support listener-sponsored KPFK by donating online at kpfk.org. Stay tuned for the Lawyers Guild with Jim Lafferty coming up next.